Happy Thursday to you. Glad to be with you on the Deliberate Orthodoxy podcast. This morning, as I share with you, as I look over our reading for today, it's a little shorter and it's actually somewhat repetitive, although it comes from the New Testament instead of the Old Testament passage we looked at yesterday from Genesis chapter 2. We find Christ quoting that same passage, just a reminder that God does not change, nor has his intentions for humanity in terms of male and female gender distinctions. Also, how he designed man and woman to come together as husband and wife. It has not changed from the Old Testament to the New Testament. And so today we're going to look here in Mark chapter 10 here in just a moment. But before we do, I want to start with our questions and answers as we do each day. And so our question for this week, our first one is, how many sexes did God make at creation? And the answer is, God made two sexes at creation. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. And the second question is, why did God make us male and female in his own image? And the answer is that he might use all the excellent qualities with which he made us as male and female for his glory as we exercise dominion over the earth. And then our memory verse comes from Psalm 100 and verse 3. Acknowledge that the Lord is God. He made us and we are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Okay. And then today our reading comes from Mark chapter 10, verses 6 through 9. And in this passage, Jesus is being questioned by the Pharisees about divorce and whether it's all right, for a man to divorce his wife for any reason. Of course, Christ rebukes them. But part of the passage that he uses to refute this idea comes from Genesis chapter 2. But we're going to read it here from Mark chapter 10, verses 6 through 7. All right. We read there in verse 6. Of course, let me give you a little bit of more context. In verse 5, we read, Jesus told them, he wrote this command, talking about Moses writing the command related to divorce, for you because of the hardness of your hearts. And this is verse 6, but from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother, and the two will become one flesh. And then Jesus begins to speak again after he has, quoted from Genesis chapter 2. He says, so they are no longer two, but one flesh. And then he says, therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. And so the Lord Jesus Christ here is speaking. Of course, he's speaking to rebut this question, or to answer the question of the Pharisees. They come to him and say, can a man divorce his wife for any reason? And of course, Jesus is reminding them of God's original intent. When God created man and woman, he created them male and female. He created them so that they might enjoy this covenant community together within the bonds of marriage, and they become one flesh. And then he goes on to say, he says, what God has put together, let no one tear asunder. And when I officiate marriage ceremonies, weddings, those kind of things, when I get to the end, that's pretty much the last thing I say before I say I pronounce you husband and wife. And so that idea there that Christ is saying is that from the beginning it was God's intent. Before sin entered into the world, he created man male and female. He gave these gender distinctions which were for his own glory, to allow mankind to create, to allow mankind to multiply, to actually assist mankind in subduing the earth, those things which God created mankind to do. And so these male and female gender distinctions, these two sexes of male and female, he gave those two sexes. He created mankind with those two sexes so that they might glorify and honor God. And then we read there, of course, in that quote, the two become one flesh. And so they complement one another. And in the marriage covenant, two become one. And as they love one another sacrificially, they glorify God, and they're able to do what he created them to do. Okay. And so, as we think about that this week, there may be someone who's listening to this and they say, well, we're kind of focusing in on marriage here. Well, it's hard to look at gender distinctions or the two sexes which God gave to us and not reflect on them in light of, or in the the context of marriage, because that's where God really lays out these differences And we see his creative glory there, because when we go back to Genesis chapter 2, we see that. Certainly, we see in the New Testament, Old Testament as well, that God holds us individually accountable. And there are those that God calls to a life of singleness, and we should strive to be content in whatever state we find ourselves, and we should do so knowing that the Lord is God and he is over all things. And if we are unmarried and he would desire us to be married, he'll send us a spouse, and he'll make it clear that that person is the person he wants us to come together with. But at the same time, we're to trust him in all things. And so it is important for us to look back and see God's glory, but also within our own marriages and within our own lives to see God has made me as I am, with these certain distinctions, and I am to look within his word for those roles that I'm to take on, the responsibilities he's given me as a man, and my wife as a woman, me as a husband within this one flesh covenant, her as my wife within this covenant, and then me as a father in this home that God's given to me, in this family. She is a mother within this family, realizing that each of us are equipped to do different things and to help one another. That's why we call, a husband calls his wife his helpmate, to help one another do that which God has called us to do. We carry all of our baggage of our brokenness and our insufficiencies, into marriage and those things, but we're to love one another, or we're to see one another as truly we are one flesh. And so we're to glorify God by submitting to each other, by loving each other, and by thanking God for giving us one another. Well, God bless you. You have a great day, and I hope this video finds you well. And I hope if you haven't yet, you'll go ahead and like and subscribe, share this video on social media, however it might be. Just help us get it out to more people. God bless you. You have a great day.